Afternoon, everybody. Thanks for taking your time to join our Zoom webinar considering a career in HR today. And we have our wonderful speaker, Miss Stacey Lewis, with us today. And Miss Stacey Lewis is the founder and the CEO of HR Interrupted and our lead HR instructor in our Human Resources Management Certificate program at Cal State Long Beach. Okay, so Stacey.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Crystal. I am so excited to be here with everyone today. I'm going to change my view so I can see everyone. I'm excited to be here. Welcome to Considering a Career in HR. We're going to take the next 40 minutes or so and talk to you about this amazing career that I have come to love for 40 years. We want to let you know that we want to make this about your learning experience. So please feel free at the end to ask questions. You can put it in the box, in the Q&A box, because we want to make sure that we make this webinar value added and content driven. All right, so let's jump in. Considering a career in HR, I think it's important that if you're going to be in a webinar of this magnitude, you should know who's talking to you. So, okay, let's go. Trying to move my. Okay, so a little bit about me. I am the CEO, founder, and chief disruptor of HR Interrupted. HR Interrupted is a full service HR consultancy firm that specializes in working with companies and organizations that have the grit to be unapologetic about challenging or really questioning old school workplace principles, ideologies that are just not applicable for today's workforce. I have about 40 years of human resources experience, both in the public and the private sector. I'm the former HR and equity officer for the Port of Long Beach, the second largest port in the nation. I have a bachelor's degree with an emphasis in OD from the University of the Pacific. I have several professional designations. So I have every letter behind my name in HR. I have an SPHR. I have from IPMA a PASHRA. I'm a certified executive for PASHRA. I have um, their training for AWI, have everything. And we'll talk about the importance of having designations. Don't share this a lot, but I'm also currently in law school. I'm pursuing a master's in employment law because I do a lot in expert witnessing and jury consulting and deposition preparation. So again, we're going to talk about staying on top of your game. I have the honor to serve with this illustrious group as a program instructor, and I do some consulting also in this space for Cal State Long Beach. Thing I'm most proud of is I humbly serve as a wife for 33 years. I have three adult kidlets. And for my personal journey, I am a cancer survivor and fighter. I love baseball, car karaoke, dancing, bowling, diamonds, and a good bowl of corn chowder soup. So that's just a little bit about me. And I think that's important to connect when we're talking about human resources. All right. So let's go. What do human resources professionals do? I know all of you, or most of you, let me not generalize, under the sound of my voice, you've heard all the stories about HR. HR is only for management. They do the bare minimum. They don't care. They just promote the policies. They're not honest. It's unfair. They don't care. That's all we hear that about HR. When you peel everything back, team, HR is so much more of that. So we know that that's what people hear, and we know that that's what people feel because when you decide to be an HR practitioner, you are deciding on a role that is not for the faint at heart. And we're going to talk about that because as an HR practitioner, you can literally change the trajectory of somebody's life with one decision. And so that's why it should not be entered into lightly. So, with all these things of what people think about HR, let's talk about a myth. And then here's another one. HR exists to protect the company, and they only show up when something's wrong. They don't show up caring. They didn't care about my FMLA. They don't care about my leave. They don't care about my concerns regarding return to office. None of that. Well, in fact, when HR is done right, it really is the synergy, the glue of the organization. It's part of the corporate ecosystem, but it drives the culture. It drives the synergy. And culture in an organization is defined nothing more than what is allowed. We put this whole big old definition on culture, but culture in an organization is what is allowed. And HR is an intricate part of that. So from your first interview to your last day of work, your whole employee experience, HR is an intricate part. All right. So if you don't walk away with anything today, or if you're taking notes, please, please walk away with this. Everybody in the organization is HR, particularly people leaders. As you can see, I didn't prescribe to the old school term of manager and supervisor, and I'm not saying anything is wrong with that. Please understand that, especially in the public sector, those are terms that we use. However, if you really peel back the work, we are people leaders, right? And that denotes something different. And so if you are a people leader, if you decide to be a people leader, you are HR. You will have to make decisions and be exposed to information that is of a human-centered approach. That's what HR is, being human-centered as ways to your approach to work. So everybody is HR. And I think that's important because sometimes it's easy for people to say, that's not me. Take that to HR, even if you're a people leader. That's not me, but no, that is you. And it typically starts with the first line people leaders. So everybody's people leaders, HR. All right. So what do we actually do in HR? There are different pillars of um, the function. You know about recruitment and selection, learning and development, leave management, uh, metrics and data, workers' compensation, risk management, benefits. I mean, there's so many pillars that we do. That is the function of HR. But if you're really thinking about pursuing a career in HR, what you want to know is we definitely hire and fire because that's what everybody says. HR, we just hire and fire. But we do so much more. We shape and nurture the organization's culture, and I just shared that with you. That culture is what's allowed. We serve as supporters of the employee experience. Work should be an experience because work is a relationship, right? A relationship between the employer and the employee. And so HR serves as a supporter of that experience. We help employees understand, obviously, pay and benefits and other terms of employment. I talked about that earlier. We answer curious and unclear questions, right? Sometimes the employee does not like the answer, but that is our role to be a reliable source, to make sure the answers are consistent across the board, and that we answer curious and unclear questions. That we provide comprehensive support to the organization and employees. Right? Again, that myth is we just represent the management or we just care about the employee. When HR is done right, and I have here, it's a bridge between employees and management. Good HR practitioners are neutral advocates. That means your role is neutral. And at some point in your daily work, your decision, you're going to have to either make a decision that leans more towards company and organizational policies or leans more towards employee interest. But you always start from a place of neutrality, right? You're neutral advocates. And then also, in doing all that, you assist in ensuring that the workplace is healthy and safe, not create happiness. As an HR practitioner, as a company, you cannot make sure that people are happy. That's not your job. But in HR, what you are responsible for is creating a workplace where people, employees can feel safe, brave to be authentic and vulnerable, and safe to ask questions free of retaliation or retribution, that they get feedback appropriately and timely, right? That employees can feel that they are seen, valued, and heard, and that the workplace is psychologically responsible, not just safe. Safe means one person, both parties responsible, right? And that employees can thrive. Because you could do all that in the workplace and an employee is still not happy. So you can't own happiness, but you do own part of creating the workplace. All right. So that's what we do. So you want a career in HR. Now what? I love this meme. It says, when someone tells you that they want to work in recruitment because it's easy money, anybody who's in this webinar who knows what works in HR, it is not easy money. It is a rewarding career. It does come with its challenges, as with any opportunity, but it really is a rewarding career when you can impact someone's life in the workplace. All right. So common entry level points for getting a career in HR. And there's a myth out there that you need to have a lot of years of experience to land an HR job. And a number of people have little to no direct HR experience. I started as a technical recruiter 40 years ago, and I used some transferable skills. When I was in high school, I had an internship with the FAA. I worked in the personnel department and I answered the phone. Right? I literally answered the phone for the director at the time in high school as an internship. And then in college, I worked for a real estate company and they had me doing some appraisals by hand and scheduling calls and greeting individuals. And I was able to transfer that into my career in HR from experience level. I had majored in psychology with an emphasis in OD, so that was helpful, but I didn't have an experience. But I was able to bring transferable skills, which sometimes is underestimated. So, again, what I'm talking about, if you want to get started, it's easier than you may think. Many people who enter HR from so many other fields and industries. And again, if you're a people leader, electrical engineering, um, if you are majoring in global trade, all of those things, all of those majors can get you on a trajectory of doing something in HR, or at least giving you a foundation for starting your people leader work. Internships and campus jobs can count as real HR experience. If you were the rush coordinator for your sorority, if you worked on the volunteer campaign and you got all the volunteers in, if you did the scheduling, transferable skills like organization and problem solving, if you did the budget for your community center or your local assembly or whatever, do not underestimate those transferable skills. And then the HR career grows, it grows with experience. You don't need to know everything in the beginning. Again, I started as a technical recruiter and I was recruiting IT individuals. And I knew nothing about technology, but I knew how to engage. I knew how to be organized. I knew how to have conversations. I knew how to follow up. And so I was able to transfer that into my first HR position. So, okay, you say, okay, Stacey, so far so good. It's hard in them streets now these days for jobs. What is out there in HR? So here's some opportunities, right? And I don't want to say caution, but I want you to be mindful. Titles are one thing, but sometimes titles don't necessarily represent the responsibility of the job. So you have HR specialists, and somebody be like, what does that mean, right? Some of the titles are a little archaic that we're using from when HR was called personnel. So an HR specialist would be someone who has the full breadth. They're like a generalist. Well, a specialist actually would be, let me take that back. An HR specialist would be somebody who specializes in one of the pillars. So you have a strong pitch towards recruitment, or you do benefits and leaves, or you do compensation, or you do data. That's kind of what a specialist is. A recruiting coordinator, you just coordinate the recruitment of the organization. Talent acquisition, that's the same thing. You may be more on a people leader perspective to do talent acquisition. A payroll assistant, you work assist with individuals getting paid. And I used to tell everyone when I was at the port, as a chief HR officer, nobody ever had to come to work, but payroll needed to be there. Everybody wanted payroll to make sure there. That's a really important function, right? Is being that payroll assistant. And I think all of you all would agree with that work. You want to make sure you get your paycheck. And then employee relations assistant, how you help resolve conflicts within the organization. I also want to say here with the generalist, the specialist is if you are defined into one of the discipline. A generalist means that you have a full breadth of you can do all of that. And I would encourage you that sometimes to get in the door, you may have to take a specialist role, but again, use those transferable skills and then start looking in the organization for opportunities where you can get exposed to all of the pillars of human resources. Right. Here's some more positions, and I created this as present and future. An internships. I cannot stress enough the importance of internships. You may have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. You may say, I don't want to do intern. There's so many great opportunities that come out of internships. And the first one is that you are now within the organization. So you can see the opportunities. See, sometimes we underestimate the power of information and being in the right place. Okay, so you're an intern and you read applications or you create packets, but you are in when the opportunities are being presented, right? And you're in front of the right individuals. So don't underestimate the intern part. Um, Assistant and associate, very similar, right? You may do some entry level work. You may assist a generalist. You might assist a recruiter. You may do some assistance uh, to a people leader in HR. So again, you're getting exposed. A recruiter, we know HR compliance coordinator. So you're making sure that there's no violation to Title VII, to all AB 20, all these statutes that that organizations have to follow in the workplace, right? So you're with the all of the compliance, and compliance come all the time. This year alone in July, there's so many statutes and rules that have been put into place for organizations, and so that's what you would do to ensure that everything is well, as well as the EEO data, et cetera, if required. You can be employee engagement coordinator. Employee engagement coordinator also means around how the employee experience. It's typically called learning and development, but now they're calling it employee engagement because it's packed in the whole ecosystem. So how are we creating um, uh, surveys? How are we finding out from the employees? Are our learning opportunities in line with employees want? What are our performance management tools looking like? All of that is a part of the employee engagement coordinator. I have a client that actually calls that the employee experience. And again, that's what they're calling their generalists. They're covering the whole entire breadth of the job. Um, HR analysts, with data around organization and employees, right? So you have an analyst who does that, HR analyst with organization and employees. They combat both. That's keeping the data, right? A lot of data, benefits and compensation, communication specialist. I will tell you, um, if I were still in the HR space right now, I would go to my leaders and say, I must have a communications team because how we communicate to employees is important. And usually organizations have a communication and they do a beautiful job doing outward facing communication to the public, to the community, to stakeholders, to boards. But the information that you communicate to employees should be treated with the same care. So for those of you who are people leaders that are on, or you're going to have a career, start thinking about it and tell your teams, hey, we need a communication person that specializes in how we communicate with the team. Change management, definitely a change management analyst. And these are kind of careers moving towards the future. There's still some there. How do we communicate change? How when we're going to roll out a policy and a procedure, how are we ensuring that we're looking at it from a well-being perspective? How are we making sure that we're looking at it from a representation perspective? All of that is what a change management analyst reviews and they're responsible for. And then for the future, AI. AI is knocking, I was going to say knocking at our door. No longer is AI knocking at our door. AI is in our door. And so, as you know, there are a lot of organizations that are making the conscious decision to turn their HR operations from, excuse me, an operational perspective over to AI. Not going to weigh in either way on that. But what I will say is it's one thing to be able to speak to a AI representative or bot around when are my benefits going to be affected. It's another to have a person if you're going to need to go out on some type of a protected leave or you have a very um, serious work matter that you're dealing with, you want to make sure that you can sit across from Stacey, right? And I can sit across from you, and we can connect from that human perspective, and we can talk about that. And so, with that being said, their HR, they're going to need individuals who are going to build that, work with that technology, but also a lot of push now are going for ODs and psychologists who will be in the workplace and say, AI, you can take that part, but we still need to make sure that we are human centered, that we have a human centered design around HR in the workplace, and that we are connecting, right? And then again, change management. Okay. All right. So, academic. What do you need to do academically, right? From an education perspective, to get an HR. So there's a myth that you have to major in HR to land an HR job. And I've said a lot in this presentation that HR values and skills and perspectives are more than just a specific major, right? Those things that you bring are more than just a major in business, more than just a major in English, more than just a major in HR, more than just a major in global supply chain. It's those values and skills and perspective that you bring as a people leader. So here is some of the, I would say, maybe more traditional majors, but again, anybody who has a desire to be a people leader, that is that you have responsibility and oversight for individuals on your team, their care, creating that workplace that I talked about, not happiness, the workplace, you are HR. So business administration, marketing, psychology, sociology, communications, public administrations, economics, but again, you can major in engineering. I had a very dear friend of mine that has an HR company like mine. She started out in, and she has an electrical engineering degree from Purdue, a undergraduate and a master's, and now she does HR consulting, right? She does HR consulting for engineers, but she made it full circle, right? So definitely don't limit yourself by your major, especially if you want to pivot towards HR. It's the skills that you're going to acquire, the transferable skills. Okay, Stacey, that sounds all good and fine and fine, but when I'm looking for a job, the interviewer's sitting across from me, they're like, "You don't have HR," or I feel that I'm not being considered because I don't have HR. Are you really telling me, Stacey, that I have a chance? I am telling you, you have a chance. So, one of the myths is that once you get a job in HR, and I would just say this in general, in a job in general, but particularly with HR, once you get a job in HR, it's just a straightforward. There's no more learning. You don't learn everything else. Where clearly that's not true. If I got 15 certifications and letters behind my name, I am 60 years old and I'm in law school, right? Because for continuous learning. So clearly that's not true, right? Because employees expect continuous learning. And even though I own my own company, I'm doing that to show my clients that I'm staying abreast of the work that needs to be done. Yes, I'm an expert witness and I'm sitting on the stand, but what more do I bring when the breath knows that I have, a master's degree in employment law? Just a little bit more. So staying updated on laws and policies and trends is all about the continuous learning. So HR, we're then more than just being nice. And the first slide showed, Crystal, that people don't even think we're nice, but we are. We're nice when we get you your paycheck, but we're not nice when you don't get your paycheck, right? So HR is more than just being nice. Um, Here's some skills that people will be looking for, your hiring managers, your corporate offices will be looking for: professionalism and ethics. In order to work in HR, and I'm going to bring this across the organization because everybody's HR, remember, professionalism and ethics. Now, people will say, let's unpack the word professionalism. That's not this webinar. That's not this webinar, but it's definitely how you entreat and how you show up in your organization's culture, right? If you work at Google, I use that for example, it's one of the ones, they don't wear suits and ties. They don't do that. The culture is more laxed, right? It's more of, we want to support your everyday, how you want to move about every day. So it's not that they have, games and all that. That's not Disney. Disney, you're gonna be buttoned up in blue and black, right? Your suit and tie, whatever the culture is. It's just that you're aligning with that and that you have ethics. You do what you say you're gonna do, and if you don't, you own up to it. Strong communication skills, written, verbal, oral, paying attention, strong communication, right? You listen well, not just the way you talk, but that you are a good listener. You listen to understand. You have critical thinking and problem solving. Again, that's stuff those are skills, not stuff. Those are skills that you earn before you come in, right? That you have tech and data literacy. We are in an ever-changing environment, particularly around technology, right? Around technology. And so we want to make sure employers want to know, even if you don't know the latest technology, you've done your research, you know how to maneuver in those spaces, that you're adaptable. This one I will tell you, participants, is really, really key. I am doing so much work right now with my clients, a lot of ER matters where employees, um, for a number of reasons, we're not pointing the finger, but adaptability just doesn't seem to be uh, a a skill. It's either my way or highway. Um, and I'll just use examples, and I'm not saying, I'm just saying the company is responsible for X, Y, and Z. I have to, I'm not in a position to return to the office before X, Y, and Z. I can't make that meeting. I can't do all these things. And to an extent, we do want, it is the responsibility of the organization to be amenable in the relationship, because work is a relationship. So what matters to the employer should matter to the employee. What matters to the employee should matter to the employer. But that adaptability is going to be key. How can you adapt? Even if you don't understand, how do you adapt? Not telling you to be something that you're not, but how well do you adapt? And are you collaborative? Do you engage in teamwork, right? Do you always have to be right? Do you always have to have the last word, right? Do you invest, right? Well, let's talk about early. When you're going to work on a project, even before you get started, do you ask the person, hey, I know that we may have different communication styles or project management styles. What style works best for you so we can get the best out of that? I particularly like emails. I don't really do a lot with Slack or MS Teams chat or anything. And this person say, well, I like the phone, right? You collaborate and you have the mindset to be collaborative. That will set you apart if you're able to demonstrate that in the interview and both when you get on the job. This one right here, EQ, emotional intelligence, this is the game changer. Organizations are looking for individuals who can identify and know how they show up in the space. They know what I call their corporate credit score. Some people walking around acting like they got an 800 credit score and they at a 400. They're not intreatable. They're not adaptable. They tend to uh, be a little borderline on things that they should do. They mansplain, or they overtalk you, or they cut you off, or they're not they're not gracious if they have the answer. Right? All those things come out. And those are things that you could prevent you. You could probably definitely get in the organization, but may prevent you from excelling as a people leader. And then your time management, right? Time management. Time is the most valuable resource we have. When it's gone, it's gone. And so how do you manage that? And not only your own time, but the time of others. How do you do that? If the meeting starts at 4 o'clock, you should be there, right? We're here today, right? Struggling with the video. Four is four, right? And then how do you give back time? Do we really need to have an hour meeting, or could that have been a 15-minute phone call? Right? How do you put all those things together? Those are the skills. And none of that necessarily has HR on it, right? All right. So, um, are you ready for your job? Your career starts, when you apply. I love this document, document, document. So again, this was really, how do I get my career started? There's a myth that volunteer work and side projects don't matter. I have gave so many examples here today. Any experience that shows initiative, these are good words. Leadership or HR related skills, and that's just in treating people, strengthens your resume. And let me talk a little bit about leadership. Sometimes there's the belief that leadership is that you are president of the HR association, you're the president of the sorority, you're the president of all these things. And so you have a leadership title. That is one definition. But leadership also demonstrates how well do you follow? Because if you're a good follower, you're a good leader. How well do you observe spaces when you are called upon? If it is applicable to what you can deliver at the time you deliver it, or you can say, I may not be the best resource for this opportunity, but I will direct us to do that. See, all that's leadership, but you don't have to have a title. A person who's near and dear to me in the workspace gave me a mantra that I have on my desk today, and I share with everyone that I coach. I do a lot of collaboration and coaching, and I always tell people leaders, and I want to leave this with you: leadership actions precede leadership titles. Leadership actions precede the titles. So just think about that as you are moving forward in your career. It's the action, and then it moves you to the title. So again, it's never too early to build your resume. So get that hands-on experience through internships, volunteering, and campus projects. Build strong communications and teamwork skills, whether it's working on a project for your thesis, whether it's a capstone that you're doing, anything initiative that you're working in, start working on your communication skills and your team skills. You may have the answer. You may be the one, but take a step back and sometimes allow the people around you. That's how you build your leadership. Leaders can follow. Network with HR professionals, alumni, and mentors. Please feel free to go to my website, hrinterrupted.com. If you want to, I connect, I get student requests all the time. I can't respond to all of them, but I love talking to people who want to be in the HR space and send you an email. I will put a disclaimer right now for the next 90 days in this school, in this law school. I'm a little busy, but I'll shoot you an email and just tell you an acknowledgement. But there's so many people that you can, alumni and mentors. Um, Build a personal brand. Key. Start building your personal brand on LinkedIn, your portfolio, your professional, you have a blog, your resume. Again, be mindful of how you show up, how people experience you in spaces. I'm not telling you to be perfect. You do you, but understand doing you and what you're trying to go, they may not align. So start building your brand, looking at your resume, going to opportunities, volunteering, talking to the right individuals, and then gain exposure to representation initiatives. So, if there's clubs or things that you belong to, or there's initiatives out in the community that are near and dear to you, again, right? Because you want to have a full breadth. Because one of the things working in HR space is that you must be able to entreat the entire workforce, right? And that's called representation. It's called the whole entire workplace from demographics must be represented. So you want to start gaining that skills. And then finally, pursue certificate programs, certifications, and designations. I'm the queen of that. I will put a plug in. Cal State Long Beach has an amazing HR certificate program with some great professors. I'm not popping my collar. I'm definitely one of them. People from the community. We have Todd Lemus, Jocelyn Padilla. There is Al. I mean, Freeman. There's so many people. Leslie Freeman that are in the class. Susan Stewart, she's an attorney for my local individuals that are really here that and care about this work. Get a certificate program, right? And then also, even if you don't want, if you're saying, I love this, but I don't want a career in HR, I said it from the beginning. If you're going to expand in your career, you should have a foundation of the people leader experience. As I close, SHRM, and I'm sure you all have heard of them in the news. But the president of SHRM, his name is Johnny Taylor. And Johnny Taylor at a conference said that daily he gets phone calls from headhunters who are looking for CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, high C-suite individuals. And he often says, "Why do you always call me?" And he says, because at that level, you must be able to have mastered how to entreat people. You must be the consummate people leader. And you gain that. You have to be able to make decisions. HR knows how to make a decision, right? Sometimes with a lot of information and sometimes with not a lot of information, right? You have to be quick on your feet. You got to know when to take low. You got to be able to support your decisions, right? You got to be able to say what nobody else can say with grace. All of those are skills that you acquire as an HR person. So I'm encouraging you, even if you don't want to be in a room of HR, start acquiring those people skills. So with that being said, I'm gonna answer this for you. Are you ready? I want you to test your skills, see if you're ready, hit the ground running, talk to each other, go back and if you took notes and see if you're ready. And again, please reach out. There's some wonderful resources with you. So with that, I am going to allow Crystal, I think, to see if there's any question. I do know we had some initial questions come in, and I want to make sure I answer those. Thank you so very much for this opportunity, and I'm going to turn you over to Crystal and Angelique. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you all for joining our Zoom webinar today.